you are just joining us on our Do You On Stage, I'm Lauren, and we're going to start our conversation in a second. Um, um, but do you, I think we're live. We're live. So, yes.
Awesome.
So, I am Lauren from our Do You On Stage. I'm here with this very talented writer and playwright who I met last summer at the National Black Theater Festival after I saw this play that I became a little bit obsessed with, Society. And I really wanted to, I've been trying to um, see who's going to produce this play here in Raleigh because I think we need it to be done here in Raleigh. And as I was thinking about this last week, I thought, okay, I got to fast track this by talking to Melda. Make it happen because we're in an election year and we
Yes.
need to make this happen. So thank you for being with me tonight. And if you are a theater director out there, an artistic director, after you hear about this fantastic work and you hear from this amazing artist, you're going to want to produce the play. So we're going to make it happen.
Awesome.
If you have any questions, please put it in the chat, in the comments on the RDU on Stage page, and we'll get to your questions. But Melda, you are sheltered or quarantining or whatever's happening in Chicago, which is where you live, but you were born in Jackson, Mississippi, which is kind of a hotbed for a lot of the conversations we're having now. That's, I mean, that's the heart of the South. So, how did growing up, or how did being born in one of what I would say the most restrictive states in the South inform who you have become as a writer and artist?
Well, I'm so glad you said born. I'm going to have to be a full disclosure. I was not raised in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm sure my Southern friends will appreciate me being honest about that. But I was birthed in Southern roots. Summer of 71, I was born there. And about 6 weeks later, my mom and my great-grandmother and a cousin were like at the tail end of the Great Migration. And so we arrived in Chicago about 6 weeks later. So although I wasn't born there, I have family and history there. My mother, my aunts, my cousins, the grandmothers, just listening to their stories, their experiences, their perseverance, their hardships, their dysfunction, the rituals, the traditions of the South, they're kind of universal. And so listening to those and with my curious mind, I'm visual. So I would visualize what they would say because they would tell these stories and I would visualize it. And then I guess essentially that's what informed my writing. I took those stories and those experiences and created them or I should say, dropped them in modern times.
Mm. Which and I think that's why I loved Front Porch Society so much, because a lot of these women you're watching and these friendships, they're people we know. They're very accessible to everyone, no matter where you come from or
Yeah.
what your history is. But what kind of stories did they share with you about what they experienced in Mississippi that speaks to what we're going through now? Because I think when I look at the movement that's happening now, which feels different than other recent protests that we've seen, I don't get a sense that a lot of the people marching and protesting understand the foundation of the fight that went on before some of them were born. I don't know that they understand the history of the civil rights movement. I was told last week they don't even teach that in our schools here in North Carolina. It's like a chapter in a book or something. So what did your family teach you about that time in the South that helps you as a mom teach your children or teach your daughters about what's happening now?
Well, with my family coming from the South, it was just the telling of how they lived. There was segregation during that time, and so there were separate water fountains. They had to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir. Those experiences, but a lot of the stories that my family shared with me, they weren't in the context of what was being done to them at the hands of white America. Their stories were about their lives in their Black communities with their Black families and their schools. Yes, it was segregated, but what they lacked wasn't what it didn't define them. I should say that didn't define them. So I would hear those stories of how they came together, how they worked hard, how they went to college and to school, how they wanted better for themselves, and they worked hard to get it. And yeah, there was dysfunction as well. But I think what they went through, and my mom was part of some of the protests, like with the sit-ins that were happening across the South at that time. And so it's really stories of perseverance, not really about what was done to us, essentially. And with regards to the youth today, maybe they aren't as informed about the civil rights movement, but do they have to be to understand what's happening to them today? I think whether they're informed or not, their experience is real. And our experience is real. I mean, I wasn't born in that time either. I didn't go through the civil rights movement myself, but I'm experiencing the same grief, the same pain today. And so if that's what motivates them to march and protest, then awesome. We all need to do something, whether we're out there in the streets or we're using our voting rights or we're using our financial power to make a difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I know you received a BA in journalism, as did I. I didn't get into Urbana-Champaign though. I didn't get into that school. I went to Indiana University. But I am one thing that's disturbed me is reporters are being hurt. First of all, there's been this attack on fake news and the press
Yeah.
for the last several years, but now there are reporters who are trying to tell stories and they can't. They're being stopped. They're being arrested. They're being hurt. So, talk to me about your take on that. I know you're an English professor. Words matter. Writing matters. Journalism matters.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
Well, I actually was a broadcast communications major, so there was print journalism involved. But essentially, what I did was more so for assignments that I had to do for projects that I created. But I do understand and I do appreciate, of course, the written word and the reporting of news, not this, what Trump has deemed as fake news, whatever that is. To me, it's just what disparages him. That's really what it is. But I think the media and journalism plays an important role in our society, because how else do we know what's happening in the world? How else do we know about the injustices or the victories or the triumphs if we don't have journalism? So I think to silence them it does a disservice to our world and to the stories that need to be told. At the same time, though, I do think that news and media has a responsibility, and their responsibility is to be responsible, to not misrepresent, to not over exaggerate or omit stories. I think that's very key too. So I think definitely there's a place for journalism and media in the world, especially in a time like this, especially now.
Well, we're in this very historic moment, and
Yes.
the media, the responsible journalists, are the ones that are telling the story and documenting it for his, they're in the middle of history. And so I get sad that a lot of our responsible journalists are being attacked.
Oh yeah.
And it's just horrible. It's horrible. But I, as you know, I loved Front Porch Society. And I think one of the reasons I loved it is it made me very hopeful. And I think there was a lot of hope in it. It was funny. I mean, it did make me laugh. Um, and,
Yeah.
and it really made me want to go do something. Um, and take some action and help people vote, get out the vote. So that's so tell me what, for people who don't know what Front Porch Society is, tell me what the play is about.
So Front Porch Society is my baby. It's the first professionally produced play that I've done. So I'm very proud of it. Essentially, it's the story of a grieving mother in rural Mississippi during Jim Crow era. She's lost her teenage son uh, on 41 years ago, on the same day that the America elects its first Black president. And so essentially, it's a story of hope. It's a story of renewed faith. Um, and it's also a story of community. So going back to your first question about Mississippi and the South, it's a story of a community of older Black women in rural Mississippi. And they live their lives or tell their stories on this front porch, their gathering place, if you will. And the front porch is very symbolic in African American communities. It's their safe space.
Mm.
So, like you said, there's comedic moments, and there's very hopeful moments, and there's very disheartening moments in the play as well. But in the end, the goal, the objective is that everyone walks away with a sense of hope.
Mm. And I did, and I was sitting next to a fellow theater critic, and he felt the same way. At one point, there was small video montage shown
Yeah,
towards the end when we saw
yes,
it at the Black Theater Festival, and we all remember where we were the
yeah.
night Barack Obama was elected. So tell me about the day he was elected in Chicago. I mean, you're living in Chicago. That's his that's his home state. Um,
Yes.
so talk to me about the conversations that you were hearing, the conversations that you were having, and how Front Porch Society was born.
So in 2008, when Obama was first elected, uh, I was living in Matson, Illinois, and so I was home with my daughters. They were a lot younger at the time, and my mother came over, and she was elated and she was excited, and she was also very emotional. And I think I shared the same emotions as she did, and for her it was because she lived in this segregated era where the thought of, the idea of a Black man running the world, or I should say running America, was unheard of and maybe not even imagined. So a lot of emotions for us all at that time. And I think living here in Chicago, because as you said, he isn't from Chicago, but he grew up here, or he spent a lot of his adult life here. And his wife, Michelle Obama, is from Chicago. So we Chicagoans had a lot of pride. We still do. There's a lot of places in Chicago that they both have touched, and they also give back to Chicago. So the sentiment, I think, overall was pride. I think it was inspiring for us as well, that the possibility is there. Whereas it wasn't before, was possible. So I think that's what we felt, and that's what I felt. And talking to some of my family members, that's what we felt. And so with that, the idea now, Front Porch Society has evolved. So the idea for it started with his election. That very notion that a Black man is the first Black man to run for president of the United States, or I should say, not the first, the second Black man to run for president of the United States, because Jesse Jackson ran years ago as well. He wasn't successful. So when Obama was successful, it just sparked an idea in my mind, like, what do the older generation think? What do the older generation think about this? Because again, it wasn't something that they may have imagined. And then those who were older probably didn't think they would be alive to see the day. And so the fact that they were alive, I wanted to know what they thought. That's really how it started. And I started interviewing older Black women, and I started asking them. And that's what formed the idea for Front Porch Society. But the other parts of the play that deal with a grieving mother, that deal with the loss of her son, that came from 2009 when there was a scandal at the Burr Oak Cemetery in Chicago, or a suburb of Chicago. And that is the very cemetery where Emmett Till's body is laid to rest. So it's this whole idea of right after his election, there's this scandal, similar, a Black boy was murdered and disfigured. We know the story of Emmett Till, or we should know the story of Emmett Till. And so that issue with the cemetery and his body, and then the election, a historic time, both of them were historic times. One was joyous, one was sad, just kind of started or laid the foundation for the play for me. Mm. And that was, again, that was in 2010.
2000. Well, the play premiered? When was the first reading?
Well, the very first reading was in 2013 in Los Angeles. And so I had a reading that was very successful. And then from there, I went to the National Black Theater Festival in 2015. So 2 years later, and I had another reading, again, very successful. And that's where I met Eileen Morris, who did the premiere at her theater in Houston, Texas.
And she directed it at the National Black Theater Festival.
Yes. She first directed at her theater, and then she brought it to the National Black Theater Festival. Yes. And last year.
Was so good, beautifully designed. It just was just beautifully designed as well. So now I want to fast forward to Election Day 2016.
Yes.
And again, I think we all remember the day after that election. Talk to me about the parallel of that day to 8 years before, the hope and joy that you were feeling with your family. Talk to me about what you were hearing the day after the 2016 election.
Well, so different scenarios, absolutely. So again, first scenario, 2018, I'm home, I'm celebrating, I'm elated. 2016, I'm half watching the election results and hear that, Trump's ahead or Hillary's ahead. And then at the end, I think I went to sleep and I woke up the next day and he had won. Just, like, oh my goodness, what happened, So I think it was more disbelief, a total opposite emotions there, disbelief. And I think a lot of that was because, and this is what I heard too, his campaign was riddled with controversy, scandal, and it just seemed like some Americans, I won't say all, but some Americans didn't care about that. They didn't care that, there wasn't the same political experience, there wasn't the same passion, that they elected him. So I just think there was a lot of disbelief, a lot of disappointment, if you will. And even now I hear where people want the old administration back. They're crying out for it, especially in times like these. We really need and want someone who's sympathetic and empathetic, and someone who can make the wrong right, if you will. And so there's a lot of missing, a lot of almost a grieving period for us all. Those I can't speak for everyone, but those of us who were in that state of disbelief in 2016.
I agree. I think it was a lot of us just woke up in disbelief that day. But what's surprising to me is when I've had interviews with Black artists here, I interviewed one of our well-known Black playwrights who lives here in our area. And I interviewed him last year. He said, from a historical perspective, it really is not surprising that Trump was elected to the Black community. He wasn't surprised that this man could get into office. Trump I'm talking about, not Obama. And so I guess as a student of history yourself, as somebody who approaches writing with curiosity and interviews people and talks to people, um,
Yeah.
does it surprise you? People voted for him and ignored all this controversy surrounding him. And even now, there's a segment of our population, I guess, um, that still believes what comes out of his mouth. Not to get too political, but it's surprising to folks, do you think?
Well, it is surprising to me. I'll say that. And those whom I interact with, I think they're surprised too at first, initially. But as time has gone on and more things have happened and events and unfairness and injustice and scandal upon scandal, and it almost seems as if he is, I don't know what the word is, almost like distant from it, or it doesn't apply to him or to anything that it comes out of that administration. Maybe now people are kind of in this state of, well, what can we do? What can we do? You know,
I don't know, impeach him. Sorry.
that was tried. That was tried, you remember. And as you can see, and so when things like that don't come to fruition, when he's tried, we have the evidence to prove, and nothing happens, then what can people do? What I know that can be done, and what many people are talking about now, especially in light of what's happened in our country and our world with the killing of George Floyd, we need to exercise our vote. Uh, Everyone who can, you have to vote. That's your power, and we can't be complacent about it. You know, we have to vote, and so when you vote, you make your voice heard, and we can enact change that way. We really can.
And that is why I want to see this play produced everywhere between now and November 3rd. I don't care if it's a reading, I don't care if it's a virtual workshop. I just
Yeah.
want these words to be heard because I think this play speaks to the importance of voting.
And it's really interesting that all things are happening at this time, like at an appointed time as this, because when I wrote the play, again, like I said, it was about how President Obama was able to galvanize the youth and how he galvanized the older generation, and this scandal at the cemetery. And so this act of voting kind of just evolved in the play. It wasn't really the central message, but the more I think about it, it is the message that needs to be heard, and this is the one that we need to act on in order to enact the change we need. Because the main character in the play, she was complacent in voting. I mean, she had her reasons, but in the end, she understands and she accepts her role as a voter because she's reminded of what those before her went through so that we could exercise to vote. The spraying with water hoses, being bit by dogs, the unfair literacy test. So in the end, she understands about the importance of voting, especially in light of what happened to her son. Then all of a sudden, you know, voting becomes more of a staple in the play than it had when I originally thought about the play.
Well, and I wanted to ask you that too. When you wrote the play in 2010, we were living in different time. We're living under the Obama umbrella, and now we're not. Um, and so I guess how has the message of the play evolved? Is that how the message of the play has evolved over the years as we've gotten further and further away from Obama's inaugural election in 2008?
You know, the evolution of the play, outside of the 11 drafts that I've done over the years, I think where it has evolved the most is with the emotions in the play and some of the visual elements. So I see the emotions and what I hear when audiences go see the play, and when reviewers review the play, it speaks to more of this roller coaster of emotions. So we go from anger to sadness to joy to acceptance in the play to hope at the end. And so I think that evolution comes forward in the play, and I've added elements that may help you to understand some of the motives of the characters.
Mm.
And the part about Obama, like you mentioned, there are some videos that have been done in the play. Now, that's a director's choice, essentially, but Eileen Moore is such a visionary. And so when she put those videos in the play to remind us of the 2008 election and Obama's administration, I think that's very nostalgic. I think it really does help people to remember better times, less hostile times, especially when you're in the midst of a play that was set in a Jim Crow era.
Mm.
The evolution really speaks to the emotions that people have and how they speak to what's happening at that time and today.
It's funny what I thought about when I wrote your play, and I think this is one of the reasons I found such. I think this is really one of the reasons I fell in love with your play so much. Um, and I don't think I shared this with you, is I had seen that movie, The Butler, about the butler who had worked in all these administrations, inspired by that story.
Yes,
And at the
yes.
end, um, Obama is elected and he's sitting on his porch. And I kind of wanted to hear more about that story. I remember watching that scene, which comes at the very end of the movie, and I was like, ooh, that, like, tell me more, give me a sequel. And I almost felt like your play answered all the questions I had from watching that scene in that movie. And I felt like it was kind of the payoff scene was your whole play that I was like waiting for with the butler. I was like, tell me that story. Tell me what he's feeling. Tell me what is happening on that porch with that family, those neighbors right at this moment. And you kind of got a sense of it, but the movie was over. So I felt like your play spoke to that.
Thank you, thank you. And I must say I enjoyed The Butler, so that's a compliment. Thank you.
um, One of the characters, I told you this before we went on camera, that I've been thinking about a lot in this play. So most of the characters in this play are older men and women. There's one character that's 18 years old. I think he's exercising his right to vote for the first time
Yes.
in the play. He's so full of hope. His name is Terrence. He's a first time voter. And I kind of love this because my daughter just voted for the first time a few months ago in our primaries. About a week ago, I was on a Zoom call, and there were two young Black artists on that call with us. Older than Terrence. I don't think they're as young as 18, but I want to say maybe they're in their 20s. They hadn't, they were afraid to speak out. They were feeling angry about what was happening in the world. They were feeling angry about what was happening on television. We were watching our city, being rioted and looted, and all of these images on television. And they were angry and they were sad, but they were afraid to speak out. They had not found their voice.
Yeah.
And I thought about the character you wrote so beautifully of Terrence, and how hopeful he was and how excited he was to get out and vote for that first time, and how my daughter was so excited to vote for the first time a few months ago. So talk to me about Terrence, and can you speak to some of those young people who might be watching who haven't found their voice or who are afraid to speak out during this time? Because I think they need the grown-ups around them to say, it's okay. If you don't speak out, like we said before we went on camera, if not now, when?
Yeah, now when, absolutely. Terrence, it's awesome that we have a juxtaposition in the play, someone who votes for the last time, and then this hopeful, youthful young man who votes for the first time. And I believe, and I was saying this to you earlier, I really do believe that if Terrence was a real live boy, he would be out there protesting. He would be part of the peaceful protests, and he would help to organize them because he had the empathy, he had the hope, he had the belief of better when he found out that President Obama, that Obama won the presidency, he was elated, he was ecstatic. And so I think he would be the leader that the young people need. He would be that leader. I really do think that the youth have what they need to speak out. If you have a pen and paper or a blank screen, write. Post it on social media forums. If you sing a song about it, write some lyrics about it, post it out there, record yourself, draw, paint. There's so many different avenues and venues that we can use, and the youth can use. And with social media, that's like their language now. And I think that social media is the reason why we have the numbers we have that are protesting. You're able to get the word out in a wider distribution. And I think everyone needs to find their own voice. Like I said, for some, it could be protesting. For some, it could just be writing a poem. One of my daughters, she wrote one yesterday. She wrote a poem about being Black in America, about what she's been seeing and witnessing. I mean, they're all going through their own emotions about it, from confusion to sadness to fear. There's fear. And so that's a way to express yourself. Yesterday, matter of fact, this is very timely, I was watching another reading by the Ensemble Theater, and they had a reading of a play called Never Again. And it was young Black kids from Houston, Texas, acting in this play. And at the end, they had a discussion with them. And so they held up these signs that they've created about what's happening in the world. And so these signs range from "My Life Matters" to, "Don't shoot," to, the gamut of the signs. And they got a chance to talk about it and what it means to them and what they want to do about this situation. So I just think young people need to find their own voice. And I put voice in quotes, because voice could be the written word, it could be singing, it could be drawing, it could be just having a conversation with an older person about what you're feeling. And then they need to be encouraged to express those emotions whenever they present themselves.
Absolutely. And the one young artist, after we had this call, it was very interesting. The next day, she did post on her social media. She's a gorgeous dancer, and posted a video of a dance she had done, and it was so powerful and beautiful. And so it gave me hope. But that's why I wanted you to speak to those young people and say, do that. Do post wherever your heart is. Post that.
Yeah, please do.
When I left your play, I felt this. I want to say hope. I want to say patriotism. I wanted to get everyone to vote. What role do you think theater and art have in affecting change in our society?
Well, I do know that as playwrights, and artists, whether in theater, we just need to tell stories we need to tell stories from multiple perspectives. So whether we're telling the story from a perspective of women or men or minorities, or from a political standpoint, I just think we need to like rephrase that saying so that now it's art can imitate life. Let our stories reflect the life that we live and what's happening in the world. And so theater should be able to connect the dots, if you will, between the story and what's happening in real life. And maybe, and sometimes this is done, but we need to do more of this, have these forums that are about the topic in which we see on the stage. So people just don't go to the theater to feel good or to be enlightened on the stage, but the conversation carries over, maybe with some sort of forum, maybe some sort of town hall or something, maybe some sort of class. Take a topic from the play. So let's say we are doing my play. Yeah, we're doing my play, and we can maybe take the topic of older Black women and their perspective. Maybe we can take the topic of just people of color and how they're affected by our administration, and then have something that's a little more tangible than what we see on the stage. I think that's a role that theater can play going forward.
I love that so much. And I really value the plays that I've seen uh,
Yeah.
that have a talk back following it, or some conversation or dialogue or
Oh,
study
yeah.
circle or whatever, so that people can commune together and not just be left to their own, go out in the world. Yeah.
Right. Right. Go out and change what based on what you saw on the stage. Like how do I do this? What do I do? You know. And I'm not saying theater has the answers, but it's at least a conversation that can start so that we can seek the answer, we can find the answers.
The conversation starter.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, a lot of folks, a lot of my white friends are looking for reading material right now to help educate themselves. They're looking for books, they're looking for scripts. She has a script, she has multiple scripts.
Yes, I do. I do.
Just saying, and
You're
uh,
right.
but they're trying to really learn about Black and Brown experience in our country. And what concerns me about some of the really popular books being circulated right now that speak to the experience is that some of these books are written by white people. So I'm not sure those are the books you should be actually reading. My opinion, don't come at me, just that's my opinion. So can you talk about your book? You wrote a book, My Soul to His Spirit, Soulful Expressions from Black Daughters to Their Fathers. We're going to put this on our reading list, everyone. I'm really not your agent. I just love your words.
You are my agent now.
just, um, but I just love your words and I love your spirit. I love your voice. So talk to me about this book and these conversations that you had that inspired this book.
Well, I will say to the white people, your friends, and to everyone, really. I mean, this book does not touch on what's happening today as much as this book touches on the relationships between Black women and their fathers. Um, it's really about how it impacts them as women and in relationships. So 63 women from across the United States, including myself, I collected their experiences, their sentiments about their fathers. And so they came to me in the forms of essays, epistles, poems, you name it. And I took all those writings. I think I got over 500 submissions at the end. And so I took all those writings. I didn't use all 500, but I took 60 something of them. And I essentially found themes in the writings. And so out of those 500 that I initially got, I was able to kind of narrow it down to 5 categories. So there's a category or a chapter entitled Loving. And so it's what the chapter says. These are loving daddy-girl relationships. Distant. These are relationships where he comes around on your birthday, or he may call you a couple times a month. Not as close relationships, but he's like in the house, but not in the room with you type of relationship. There's a chapter entitled Abandoned, where at one point he was in your life, but now he's completely gone. You have no forwarding address, no phone number, or anything like that. There are forgiven relationships. So these are the relationships where whatever happened in the past, you two have made amends, and now you're working forward and you're rekindling a relationship. And then the last chapter has to do with deceased fathers. So whether he was a great dad or he was a dad who was distant or abandoned, now he's gone. And so essentially the book speaks to those relationships, and these women get to express their feelings about their fathers. And I just think that his presence or his lack or the lack thereof of a father's figure's life in a Black woman's life impacts them. And I think in all women's life, it really does impact them and how they view the world, how they review relationships going forward. So that's the type of book it is. It's more of a cathartic read is how I describe it. And maybe we all just need a little healing in this time. So
Well,
absolutely.
and I think one thing that is sometimes lost in sound bites or headlines, is that George Floyd was a dad. He was a father. He had this little girl. Um, and what was in my heart was we're all jumping on the hashtag Black Lives Matter, but for me it's Black mothers, Black fathers, sisters, brothers, sons. These are people. These are in these lives, woven in these lives. These are people. And I think sometimes when we hear the stories on the news, especially when we're hearing just sound bites or seeing, a sentence or two on social media, we're losing the fact that these are human stories. These are universal stories. It's not a hashtag to me. And that's where I just, there's more to the hashtag. I guess that's what I was feeling was in my heart last week, when I was seeing images that it's mothers, fathers, there's no matter where you are in your life, there is a gateway that you can relate to this person. He could be your father, he could be your brother, he could
Yes.
be your son.
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
that's where, for me, that's the gateway into these stories. And that's what I loved about your book. That's what I loved about Front Porch Society, is it was a gateway into being a spy on the wall in this neighborhood, seeing these women, how they interact with each other, their um, biological family relationships, and then their chosen family relationships with their neighbors. And that's what I was getting from it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that. The more than a hashtag, because George Floyd, you don't have to be Black to empathize and understand what his death means. And we see that because the protests are transcending color lines. They really are. And I'm very encouraged by that. And we all should be encouraged by that. So there is strength in numbers. So that's
Well,
how we exchange.
and the woman who directed this play at the Black Theater Festival, I actually attended a workshop where she was on the panel. I think it was the day after we saw your play, and she said, um, the stories she presents on her stages, they're not just Black stories, they're universal stories, and I love that. That's why Black theater matters. That we're going to have that conversation on Thursday of this week. So you have a reading, that same group in Texas, they are doing a reading of another play of yours, Coconut Cake. So tell me about that one, because then, I'll be telling everybody to produce that.
Yes. Yes, Eileen Morris, fantastic director. She has really taken me under her wings, and I do appreciate that. And so Front Porch Society was the first play that she produced of mine. And so now she's going to do a reading. We were originally going to do a production, but in light of COVID, we've had to push things back, and that's totally understandable. So in light of that, theater still exists, and so it's just virtual now. And so on Sunday, June 21st, at 6 p.m. Central Time, there will be a virtual reading of my play, Coconut Cake. The Ensemble Theater in Houston, Texas has created something called online entertainment. That's what it is. And they're taking these plays, and like the one I talked about called Never Again, and they're doing readings of them. So they're keeping theater alive. And so I'm glad to be a part of it. Essentially, Coconut Cake is like Front Porch Society in that I've replaced the older Black women with older Black men, and I've replaced their safe space from the front porch to McDonald's, of all places. And the reason why is because not all, but many older Black men in Chicago have been meeting at McDonald's early in the morning. And this is their safe space. They meet, they have coffee, they talk. They're there for hours. And so I eavesdropped, if you will. I went out to the McDonald's and I sat there and I talked with them and I listened to their stories. And again, universal stories came out of it. So coconut cake, and coconut cake really is analogous for, it's a metaphor for something. But the story is about their good old days and their health issues and mental illness. So you have these three components of good old days, health issues, and mental illness, and how it affects them. So what I've done in my play is I've basically taken older Black men from the ancillary roles that they sometimes are in, and I've made their lives matter in this play. And so, yeah, we're gonna have a good time. She's going to have some great, wonderful actors reading in the play. Ted Lang from The Love Boat and Alex Morris, who's another great actor, are all going to lend their talents and read for the play. So I really hope everyone can attend. And afterwards, just like what I said, Eileen Morris gets it. We're going to have a talk back. So we're going to take some topics of the play and we're going to talk about them. So if everyone can hang out after the reading, I'll be there and we can talk and ask questions and just kind of have a good time.
I love that. And she's such a leader and such a powerhouse artistic director. I just really enjoyed hearing her speak, not just about your work, but just about the state of Black theater in this country, which she's really interesting person. So I will put the link to that reading when I repost the video tomorrow. I'll have all so people can buy tickets and buy your book.
Oh, well, thank you.
Front Porch Society. Hint, hint. I know there are a lot of artistic directors watching right now, but you got to do it before November 3rd because we got to get everybody to vote.
We got to get it in.
As a playwright and a writer, this first half of 2020 has been historic and interesting and crazy. What kind of work do you think we're going to see from our artists and writers on the other side of this pandemic? The question I was asking prior to a week or two ago was, are we going to see a ton of pandemic plays? Now I'm kind of wondering what are the stories that are going to come out of this moment?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. You may see a lot of pandemic plays, but I think our playwrights out there and our artists out there are thinking a little beyond that or a little more deeper than that. And I think you're going to see plays that deal with some of the systemic issues that are leading to pandemics, that are leading to the killings of innocent Black men and Black women. I think that's what you're going to see. And I think it's going to be from all perspectives. You know, like I said, we're going to talk about it from maybe a gender perspective or a race perspective. I just think we're going through right now with being home and social distancing and seeing what we're seeing on the news and videos, I just think people are thinking a little deeper about the subject. And so I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that those are the type of plays we'll see and the type of art that we'll see. And likewise, I think there are people who are going to take a lighthearted view of it, you know, not to minimize it, but maybe they're going to look at how this time in our nation has caused us to do what we're doing, Zoom more. You know, we're starting to redefine how we interact with people. Actually, I have a college buddy now who's working on a script about this whole notion of Zooming and how that works. So I think there's going to be those sad stories. There's going to be those intellectual stories. And I think there's going to be some entertaining stories that come out of the pandemic when we get on the other side of it, as you say.
Do you, as a writer, as an artist, and I know you're teaching, you're a professor.
Yeah.
So were you teaching, did you have to pivot to the online teaching towards the latter part of the semester?
Right. Well, I've always taught online. So even my teaching load has been equally divided between face-to-face classes and online classes. What was different though is that at the last minute, I had to, and we had to take our face-to-face classes and transform them into what we call remote learning. So different from online learning in that now everything is live. So I think that was the biggest challenge, is how do I take what I was doing in the classroom, we just abruptly stopped, and now I got to take all of that and get these students who didn't sign up for online learning now, to get them to make that transition to this live teaching situation. So yeah, I mean, we adjusted,
Are you
but I've
teaching
always been
English?
doing online learning.
Are you teaching English? Are you a professor of English?
So I teach composition, I teach research writing, I teach African American literature predominantly.
Oh, very good. Well, and I know my son, he's a college student. He struggled pivoting to the, he didn't sign up for remote learning. He likes the face to face. That's how he learns best. And it was definitely an adjustment. So I feel for the students who
Had
I
to make Yeah, yeah, and I heard that same statement from some of my students, that I didn't sign up for online learning. I don't learn this way. I mean, even my own daughter, one of my daughters talked about that. Like, I don't really learn this way. I need to be in the classroom and see the teacher and talk to the teacher. And again, in an ideal situation, that's how it would have been. I mean, but we all had to adjust. And I think the biggest adjustments as professors, as teachers, is that we're flexible, that we understand that this was a transition, a difficult transition for some, and even for us as teachers. I mean, it was a difficult transition as well, because again, like I said, I went from seeing you in the classroom twice a week and having time to talk with you and to help you, to go over things repeatedly if I needed to, give examples, to okay, everyone, we're all in this Zoom, turn your cameras on. Okay, does anybody out there? It went from that situation to this, to this new medium for them. But, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, but I think more unfortunately, that's just where we are today. And learning has to continue. So.
hope so. I hope learning will continue. And um,
Right.
as a playwright and a writer and an artist, do you does a period of time like this nurture your creativity and have you writing more, or does it hinder your creativity? I've heard both things from artists I've interviewed.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think for me, I had an assignment. I have a commission with the Ensemble Theater. And so I've been spending all my free time really researching and writing. Yeah, there are days when, I think before I really got into the research and really into the writing, I wasn't very motivated to write anything. I had ideas in my head, but I just wasn't motivated. I was caught up with this adjustment to home, helping my kids out with making their adjustment. So, just didn't really feel like it. Or, like I said, that complacency started to set in. However, lately, I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged because, forums like this are allowing me to talk about my writing. And so then it encourages me to want to write as well.
Mm.
But I can
Writing.
definitely understand.
We definitely need writing.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
I can definitely understand those who aren't writing right now, just because it's such a challenging and reflective time for people right
Mm, definitely. Well, and talk to me. We had a local artist, a local writer, Moses. His play Pooled had its national debut at the National Black Theater Festival, and he and I spent a lot of time in interviews talking about what that moment meant for him as an artist. What did the moment mean for you when you saw this play come to life on this national beautiful stage in Winston-Salem last summer?
now. Words really can't express it. They're like poor tools to express the emotions that I felt. I remember when I was at the National Black Theater Festival in 2015, because that's when I had the last reading of it there. And I remember at the time, someone said to me, you need to get your play produced here. And I didn't really understand what that meant. And it's just how everything just happened, just Eileen heard about it and she wanted to do it. And then after she produced it, she talked about sending it to the National Black Theater Festival. And again, I don't think the magnitude that really, I really understood it until I was there. and just being there and listening, because I sat in the audience too, listening to the comments of the audience, seeing them come into the theater and seeing them putting extra seats out in the front because capacity, the people were still coming. Like that feeling is beyond words. I was humbled by it because again, you know, I was writing this play in 2010, 2011 at my mother's dining room table. You know, I would write it there. I would go to Panera and write. And yeah, I liked the play, but I didn't know anyone else would like the play. And just how everything has manifest in these years to be in that theater on that day at that time with all those people enjoying my play, it was surreal. It really was.
Mm.
Yeah.
What would you say to other um, people of color who want to start writing? Are we in a, I feel like with Jeremy O. Harris's slave play and the success of that play on Broadway, on a big mainstream stage like that, um, that perhaps we're at a crossroads where we're going to tell more diverse stories. We're going to hear from more voices like his, like yours, on mainstream stages. Are is that just wishful thinking on my part, or do you see a shift in the types of stories we're willing to present on stage?
You know, that play has its place, like mine has its place. I think there are so many voices out there and so many stories that not every story is going to make it to the stage, but I think there's room for them. The shift, again, like you were asking before, the type of stories that will come out on the other side, I think those stories, again, will be a little bit more thought provocative than what we've had before. Um, and I think that's just because of, you know, what's happening now is causing people to think differently. And people are putting their emotions out there in a way that maybe hasn't been done before. And so, yeah, I think there will be a shift. And I hope that that shift will be meaningful. And I hope that it will allow more voices to be heard and that the impact will be greater than maybe it's ever been before.
And what advice would you have for those young um, men, women, really not even young? They don't have to be young, just people of color who may have stories in them that they want to get out. What advice would you have for those aspiring playwrights? Saying, "Wow, I have a story in me. I want to tell that story."
Tell it. And I don't want this to sound cheesy, but it's so true. You have to write and you have to put it out there. And putting it out there is going to be scary. It's going to be nerve-wracking because this is your baby. You've been writing it. And then you have to let someone read it. And you're going to have people say, no, don't like it, doesn't work for us. Maybe next year, because I heard that many times. But keep writing, keep putting it out there. You only need one yes. That's all you need. One yes, and that can make the world of a difference. So again, keep writing and just don't give up on it. And really, for me, life has really just been favor. It really has been. I mean, I didn't know Eileen Morris. I didn't know many of the people who have produced my play, but it's just being in the right place at the right time. And I just really believe that my life has been ordered and that many of the things that have happened to me in my writing is just favor, you know. And so I just encourage everyone who has a story to tell to write it, submit it, get it out there, and just have faith and believe that the right person will give you a chance. Because again, you only need one person. You only need that one.
Well, and I would say maybe favor, but I also think it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
One of the artists I was speaking to, he said, I don't believe in luck. I believe in doing the work. So, yeah.
But favor is not luck, though. See, for me, favor is not luck. And so you do have to put in, that's the exercise of your faith, is that you do the hard work, and that you do make the connections and you do go to the festivals and you do talk to the right people, and take those steps of faith. So absolutely, you just have to do it.
Mhm. Well, I have enjoyed reconnecting with you. Like I said at the beginning, it's a little bit selfish on my part because I want everybody to produce this play,
Thank
uh,
you.
because it is helpful, and I want to encourage everybody to vote. And if theater is the platform for getting that message out to people, then this is the play.
Thank you. So, Lauren, I just really want to thank you and let everyone know that you have been a champion of my play since you saw it in August of 2019, and you've never forgotten it. And so I really do thank you for that. And like I tell people, you just need one person to believe in you, and Lauren has believed in the play. And so I thank you for that. I really do thank you.
Well, we will see it here in Raleigh before all is said and done. If I have to produce it myself, and I told you when I met you, I'm not a producer, but if I just have to figure it out myself, I'm going to figure it out.
All right.
Um, Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will put the link to your website so people know where to find you and where to read more of your work.
Thank
And I
you.
hope everybody will see Coconut Cake. I just think you have such a really funny and poignant voice in theater, and I just want everybody to hear it. So
Thank you so much.
thank you. Okay, so everyone, thank you for watching. If you tuned in late, this will live on our Facebook page. It'll be posted with all the links on our website tomorrow, rduonstage.com. And tomorrow at noon, come back and join me here on Facebook Live. I will be talking with Nicole Brewer. Nicole did this amazing workshop I attended back in February on anti-racist theater, and I just can't wait for you to meet her, because as much as I want you to produce Melda's play, I want you to all hire Nicole to come. These are all selfish things that I'm doing this week, but I want everybody to hire Nicole to do her workshop in your theater so you can begin doing the work to go beyond the hashtag. So, but thank you again, Melda. Take care. Stay safe. I hope it's not the next Black Theater Festival, National Black Theater Festival, that I see you, but I will see you on June 21st online.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Take care, Lauren.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.